Recently, I looked into the story from Fallout 4. If you missed that video, then it's down in the description. I also previously did videos on Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, along with separate videos on the vaults, so go and check those out if you wish. Now, I will say in comparison to the vaults from the previous two games, the ones in Fallout 4 were disappointing. With the vaults themselves being Vault-Tech's version of human and social experimentation, the stories behind the vaults in Fallout 4 weren't as chilling. The terminal entries were pretty basic, whereas ones from the Capital Wasteland and the Mojave were downright chilling to read. For example, no one vault captivated me more than the Sacrificial Vault in New Vegas, but alas, we're here to discuss the vaults of Fallout 4 nonetheless. Before we begin, please note that there will be spoilers in this video for Fallout 4, but let's begin. So this vault will have been visited by every single player that played the game. It's the vault that was built behind the sole survivor's home suburb of Sanctuary Hills. In it, we can see that the residents of Sanctuary Hills are tricked into stepping into what the Vault-Tech scientists called decontamination pods, when really, they were cryopods. And then the residents of Sanctuary Hills were cryogenically frozen, but for what purpose? Well, simply put, it was intended to measure the effect of long-term cryostasis on subjects who were, of course, unaware of it, and I'd guess for the people to be able to cheat time and death itself. There was also an overseer in charge of this vault. The idea was that conditions on the surface would be monitored, and once safe to emerge, the overseer would issue an evacuation order. This would only take place after the mandatory 180-day shelter period, and the order would come directly to the overseer from Vault-Tech itself. And in the lead up to the end of this period, with the staff down there going a bit stir crazy, they were about ready to leave this vault. But once that 180-day period had elapsed, no evacuation order would come. Since the overseer had deemed that conditions on the surface were too hostile, the staff and the security teams would revolt against the overseer, who would subsequently place the vault into lockdown, trapping people in the main part of the vault where they would die. When the sole survivor wakes up, he is, as the name suggests, the only survivor, as everyone else is dead in their cryopods, as their life support systems failed. The staff are involved in a gunfight, and the vault is dealing with a radroach infestation. As we learn from the story, Sean was taken from one of the pods, and the sole survivor is forced to witness the execution of their spouse by Kellogg, who was working for the Institute, as Sean was wanted by them for his pure uncorrupted DNA in order to produce the human-like Gen 3 synths. The sole survivor discovered that Kellogg was ordered by the Institute to turn off the life support for the other pods, but due to an error, the sole survivor was released 60 years later, but Sean reveals that it was him that ordered the sole survivor, his father, released from the cryopod. Vault 114 is another vault that is tied to a quest. A main quest, actually, and that is the quest in which the sole survivor has to go and rescue Nick Valentine from Skinny Malone's Triggermen. This vault is located in Park Street Station, and it was to keep the wealthy citizens of Boston and their families safe from the horrors of nuclear annihilation. Vault-Tech had brought in a third-party contractor for this vault, as it was to be built in a different kind of location to the others, and that was inside the station. The wealthy people the vault was to protect were local businessmen along with high-ranking members of government. They were all no doubt elated at the news that they, in the event of the world ending, would be cohabitating with other elites like themselves. Don't want to rub shoulders with the dirty peasants, do they? But the luxuries would not be afforded to them inside this vault. Oh no. Single-room apartments to house these rich families, no 6-bedroom complexes for them, and they would be required to dine and bathe in the same room too. Vault-Tech would interview a set of candidates for the role of overseer, and they found the perfect guy to do it. A guy who was anti-authority and called himself Soup Can Harry, who was offered the job. The guy even ate a Braxo cleaner, a detergent.
This is Vault-Tech interview number 87 for the position of overseer for Vault 114. The candidate has refused to give his real name and has only provided the name Soup Can Harry?
That's right. I ain't telling you nothing. My name is the name I call myself, not the rank and number the government branch on me. No, sir.
Fascinating. Mr. Soup Can, would you mind telling me why you're distrustful of the government?
I've seen what they do. Gum up the works with red tape and bureaucracy, take every hard-earned cent and use it to fund their Illuminati, Freemason sex parties. I'm a free man. I should be able to live as I see fit. My taxes pay for them streets and alleys and dumpsters. I'll sleep sleep where I want.
Sir, according to this, you haven't paid taxes in many years.
I seen the back of them Abraxo boxes. Not for consumption? Don't you tell me what to do. I'll eat what I want.
Sir, you may just be the perfect candidate. How would you like to be the new overseer for Vault 114?
I ain't wearing no goddamn tie. Or pants.
This vault had been set up in order to test the reactions of these rich elites in their now very stressful situation. The idea was to take away the luxuries these people had loved and enjoyed, and place them under the care of an overseer that was quite obviously incompetent, and the Vault Tech staff were told not to undermine the overseer. This vault, however, wasn't finished, as its development was still ongoing in October 2077 when the bombs fell. And as we also saw from the game's plot, the vault had been converted into a den used by the Triggermen, led by Skinny Malone. Approaching an old but small junkyard, the sole survivor can come across Vault 81. The vault itself was set up by Vault Tech to use human test subjects, against their will of course, in order to create one cure for every single known disease in the world. The vault was built as a main vault, with the residents in it, and a secret observation vault next to it. The overseer for this vault was a Dr. Olivette, and Vault Tech wanted her as she had a background in applied medical research, and because the previous candidate had fallen ill. She soon found out the research being carried out there were human trials and told herself that if there was anything unethical about this research, then she'd blow the whistle on the whole thing. She, after receiving her briefing, did soon realise that she probably would not be able to blow the whistle on this, as the backers of these trials were high-ranking members of the US government, so she was trapped, essentially. With the Great War now kicking off in 2077, Dr. Olivette made a decision. She sabotaged the alert system, a system which alerts the Vault Tech scientists to make their way to the vault, and one by one the residents, or the intended test subjects, were the only ones that showed up for admission. Despite her attempts to sabotage the list to make sure no scientists turned up, two of them still did, Flint and Collins. And Burroughs showed up earlier that morning because he thought there'd be a drill. Anyway, with everybody now sealed inside, Dr. Olivette enacted the next part of her plan. The goal of the research was to reach stage 3 trials, and they did it pretty fast using petri dish testing and animal trials on mole rats. They did it much faster than Dr. Olivette anticipated, and they did this with the assistance of a Miss Nanny robot they'd programmed and nicknamed Curie. The next part of the Vault Tech experimentation plan was to use nozzles to infect the people in the vault, but Dr. Olivette sabotaged these. Burrow, though, the smart man that he is, found out pretty fast, so Olivette simply cut contact with them and sealed them inside the research vault, therefore condemning them for the rest of their lives. Burroughs would repeatedly attempt to contact Olivette, but she would ignore him, and one by one, they would all perish. Curie would continue to work on the cure all those years. Now, when the sole survivor gets there, he finds the vault sealed, and trying to use his Pip-Boy to open it, he is contacted over the intercom by an Officer Edwards. The Overseer, learning of the sole survivor's presence, chooses to open up the vault and allows them inside on the condition that the sole survivor helps them out by giving them 3 fusion cores. Now inside the vault, the survivor meets the various residents there. Helping them out with their problems, such as recovering a young girl's cat and giving a sample of blood for research purposes, the survivor comes across a dire situation in the medical bay. A young boy called Austin has been bitten by something, a mole rat, one of the ones used by the Vault Tech scientists centuries ago. They'd been breeding in that secret area of the vault, and of course the residents had no idea they were there, nor that the secret area even existed. Well, except for one vault dweller, who had found the secret area and who would hide his stash of chems there, and who found out about the mole rat experiments. Anyway, the vault dwellers enlist the survivor's help, asking him to try and find a cure for Austin inside there. Making his way through there, killing all the rabid mole rats inside, the sole survivor meets Curie, the robot, still working away after all these years. Turns out that she was able to develop a cure for the mole rat disease 83 years ago. The thing is, there's only one dose, so the survivor can take it for himself, dooming Austin to death, or he can give it to Austin, which means the survivor will continue to live with the mole rat disease in his system, reducing his maximum health. The sole survivor is then awarded a room in the vault, if saving Austin. When visiting Far Harbor, the survivor is approached outside the harbor by a robot that calls itself Pearl. She says there's been a murder at the Cliff's Edge Hotel and that the survivor should go there as the residents need help in getting to the bottom of it. Arriving at the hotel, like everything else, it's a mess, and fighting through all the ghouls there, the survivor finds a vault there in the basement. To his surprise, he's greeted not by a human vault dweller, but a robot one named Maxwell. In fact, everyone in this vault is a robot. Being led to the crime scene, a robo-brain lies there, dead, and it's the body, well, the brain of the hotel's owner, Mr. Ezra Parker. A classic case of whodunit. But before we go on, let's look at what's going on in this vault. So Vault 118 is a very lavish vault. As you'd have guessed, it was a vault built by the rich for the rich. It's essentially a hotel within a hotel, and it was unfinished by the time the bombs fell in the Great War. Normal working class individuals would be admitted to the vault along with the ultra wealthy. But of course, since the vault wasn't finished, this never happened. Because Ezra Parker, who is the owner of the main hotel and the man who was funding this thing, was having a bit of an issue obtaining the money that his guests had pledged. These guests were the ultra rich I was talking about, and were celebrities basically, with actors, artists, singers and others becoming Mr. Parker's investors. Vault-Tec were also an investor and helped construct the vault, and they came up with a social experiment for this vault. Vault-Tec's plan or experiment was the working class individuals being led through the lavish parts of the hotel vault and to the cramped second wing, where they would live under the rule of the rich, and the rich would have the robot staff attending to their every need. Prior to the bombs dropping to Earth, Burt Riggs, who was a researcher for a company called General Atomics and who worked on the robo-brains, informed the other investors that their best chance of surviving the inevitable coming war was to have their actual brains placed into these robo-brain units so they could live on after the world had been destroyed. The way they would be able to identify one another would be through a specific accessory that they would wear at all times, and thus, when inside the vault, the door sealed once the bombs started dropping, and the only human inside the vault would be the Overseer. But back to the murder mystery. Through investigation and finding clues inside Vault 118, the survivor discovers that Ezra is not dead. The dead body, or rather brain, belongs to another elite called Juliana Riggs, Burt Riggs' wife. Ezra had placed his accessory onto the dead Juliana's robo-brain after he'd killed her to make people think he was dead, and he posed as her. But why kill her? Well, essentially she discovered that Ezra had received the money from investors, but he was a con man. He was running an embezzlement scheme. The Overseer had realised too, after Juliana had told him that she'd paid the money to Ezra that he claimed to have not received.
Progress on construction of the second wing of the vault is completely stalled. Once the premier area of the vault had been completed, funding seems to have been cut off. My supervisors have informed me that they haven't received payment from Mr. Parker, and Vault-Tec won't pay out of pocket to continue construction. I've repeatedly approached Ezra about the finances, but he keeps telling me that Mrs. Riggs hasn't transferred the funds. However, when I asked her, Juliana said that she had just given Ezra extra for the gold paint in the rooms. I've hired an investigator to look for signs of embezzlement in a few weeks.
Then, as mentioned, the bombs fell and the ultra-rich in the vault were sealed inside, along with the Overseer. The people outside and the working class people were left outside the vault, and the Overseer would write about this and how the door wouldn't open when he would try and let them inside. Many years after the Overseer had died, likely self-inflicted, and after many years of Ezra continuing to con the others out of their money, Juliana found proof of Ezra's crimes on the Overseer's terminal. Upon confronting him, this is when Ezra killed her, as he was scared that his money-making con would be revealed, and he swapped their accessories to make it look like he was the victim. Her husband Bert knew something was up with Juliana, but he couldn't quite figure out what, as Ezra did quite a job in impersonating Juliana. In a confrontation with Ezra, the survivor learns that Ezra was planning to leave the vault soon and would take all of the money he'd stolen from the residents with him. The survivor can either put Ezra down or just leave the situation be, and he leaves the vault. Right next to the glowing sea, the survivor can stumble across Vault 95. It's held by the Gunner faction, so it's got some pretty effective defences such as turrets, spotlights and a couple of assaultron units. Fighting his way inside and eliminating the Gunners who are calling this their home, the survivor finds many people here dead, and terminals paint a good picture of what the vault was used for by Vault-Tec. It was a detox facility. The experiment was for Vault-Tec to place people with chem addiction into a vault with other addicts, and they would hide a stash of chems somewhere inside the vault. The vault was advertised as a rehabilitation vault program for addicts, and the Overseer would be elected and changed every year, and 5 years into the program, all was going well, and the residents were beating their addiction. They voted to continue the program as they believed it was doing them good. It was as Vault-Tec thought though, that when there were no drugs there to take, an addict can beat their addiction. But in 2082, one of these addicts would find the chem stash hidden in the vault. Only this wasn't any addict. This was a Vault-Tec plant who was pretending to be a drug addict, and after unearthing these hidden chems, well, it's safe to say that the reaction of the residents wasn't nice. They became violent and got addicted again pretty quickly. Well, most of them did. Others tried to stay away from the drugs but ended up taking them anyway, as they couldn't handle the level of violence being exhibited by their former vault mates. Everyone in the vault would end up dead, as the remaining vault dwellers there would be wiped out by the gunners, who of course ended up occupying the vault. Exploring the Commonwealth, the survivor can stumble across Malden Middle School. In the school's basement lies Vault 75. Entering, it's either inhabited by gunners or synths, and this depends on whether or not the Institute has been destroyed. With the Institute gone, the synths would attempt to take this vault from the gunners by force, which is what happened when I turned up there. Anyway, the vault itself being in the school was a good place, so that if anything was to happen, then the children would be safe. Obviously, their parents were also given spots inside the vault too. But once the bombs fell, Vault-Tec's experimentation would take center stage. Upon entering the vault, the children were separated from their parents, and the adults were taken away for what the Vault-Tec staff called orientation. In reality, the adults were killed by Vault-Tec. Now, according to the terminals inside the vault, this one was experimenting on the refinement of human genetics. Selective breeding, essentially. Improvement of the human genome. The overseer was specially selected, as he was previously a military officer. The children were taught from a very young age about a place called Up Topland, and this is the surface. They were taught about the horrors up there, and were told that they would be trained in order to be able to survive Up Topland. This is what would spur them on, to be the heroes that would liberate Up Topland. This vault was a kind of super soldier program in which the children would undertake fitness tests, which were so vigorous that it resulted in heart attacks, and other types of testing, and this was to separate the weak from the strong. Therefore, the strong would be separated from the rest of the subjects, were taken to the genomics lab, and they would have their genes harvested once they reached the age of 18, and those genes would be used to cultivate embryos. The smart children would join the Vault's science division. Both soldiers and scientists were to be kept away from the general population of the test subjects, so they would not recognize these new members of staff. For those who were not physically fit enough or smart enough, they would be killed once they turned 18, after the evil staff members would throw a so-called graduation party for them. They were deemed surplus to requirements, so they were killed and incinerated. One terminal speaks of a rebellion taking place inside the vault, and the vault was at some point opened with a bunch of these subjects escaping. Now, since the vault is populated by gunners, it's a popular theory, not yet confirmed, that these subjects could have been the ancestors of what is now the Gunners faction. So a lot of these Vault-Tec experiments were conjured up by the twisted mind of a Dr. Stanislaus Braun. We spoke about him in the Fallout 3 Vaults video, but he was in charge of these tests and experiments as part of the Societal Preservation Program. That wasn't until the bombs fell. Braun escaped to a vault in the capital wasteland named Vault 112, which he became the overseer. This vault was a simulation vault where the residents there would be suspended inside a virtual reality simulation called Tranquility Lane, which was essentially Dr. Braun's twisted fantasy of having control over people's lives. He'd brutally kill them or arrange their deaths, just to get a kick out of it, and he'd just reset the simulation. He'd get bored over the years though, and would change the locale from time to time. Only when the lone wanderer came across the vault, it was Tranquility Lane. Anyway, that's a small bit of background on Dr. Braun. In the Commonwealth, the sole survivor can observe a radio signal, and going to a quarry in the town of Quincy, he finds a bunch of raiders trying to force their way inside Vault 88. Killing them and speaking with the overseer inside, he is granted access, and after clearing rubble blocking the overseer in, he meets this overseer, Valerie Barstow, who is now a ghoul. She is surprised to see that the sole survivor is wearing a Pip-Boy, but knows that he's not from Vault-Tec, so she immediately questions why he's there. She explains that she was on a tour of what was going to be her pride and joy, as she puts it, but the bombs fell, hence why Valerie was trapped inside the unfinished vault. The sole survivor is attacked by one of the many feral ghouls there in the area, this one called Julian, and after putting the rest of them out of their misery, he speaks with Valerie. She reveals that this large cave was in fact a testing area for prototype devices that, after being used in tests, were to be shipped to vaults. It turns out that Valerie is, or was, a big fan of Dr. Braun, and he had tasked her with these tests. So, clearing out the tunnels in this large cave, which feature Mirelurks and their queen, a large number of rad scorpions, mole rats, and a glowing death claw, the survivor helps Valerie build and test these devices after activating a beacon which lures people to the vault. Some see through it, but one, Clem, doesn't, and he's more than willing to test out these devices for them. Parameters are set by the survivor on terminals, with some devices designed to do things to the test subject's vision, such as coercing them to be more obedient via subliminal messaging, or a soda machine that produces drinks that suppress appetite, meaning that residents won't need as much food or they can be a mood booster. Another prototype is a slot machine, which boosts servitude. After these tests, Valerie decides to bugger off, leaving the sole survivor as the overseer, with her saying that she will deliver these prototypes to the other vaults. This vault was a part of the Vault Tech Workshop DLC, which allowed people to build their very own vault. But that's pretty much it for the vaults of the Commonwealth. There was a vault in Nuka Town, but that was more of a show vault to advertise the vaults, and didn't really have a story behind it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you aren't already, but for now, take care and I will see you in the next one.